Tonight, NBC News first to report Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on the brink to make an announcement that he is running for president. Multiple sources confirming the GOP heavyweight will launch his campaign next week, officially stepping in the ring to battle former President Trump for the Republican nomination. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott also expected to make a major announcement on Monday. But does anyone have enough support to beat Trump? Plus, the news just in about former Governor Chris Christie. We'll tell you. Also breaking at this hour, a car rushing through a gate at the Vatican, breaching an inner courtyard, guards firing at that vehicle, what we're hearing about where the Pope was at the time of the ramming. Late today, authorities releasing dramatic body cam footage showing the moments police raced to take down a mass shooter, terrified residents pointing cops towards the gunman, one officer shot in the crossfire. The chilling instant those officers took the shooter down. Charlotte Inferno, a massive 5-alarm fire breaking out in North Carolina. Several workers trapped inside when the site went up in flames. Search and rescue efforts still underway. Also tonight, the shoplifting epidemic spiraling out of control. Target reporting losing $763 million of inventory over the last year. The extreme measures some stores are taking to keep products safe on their shelves, and what experts say is driving this new surge. Plus, explosion on the border, a powerful blast caught on camera in Tijuana. Multiple injuries reported. What happened here? And DNA discovery, the emotional reunion you won't want to miss. How these two siblings found each other for the first time after 50 years of living apart. Top story starts right now. And good evening. A big news night tonight. After months of speculation and rumors, the campaign that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been building in the shadows is on the verge of bursting into the national spotlight. NBC News first to report that DeSantis will formally announce a run for president next week. And the signs have been stacking up for months. So we want to walk you through some of the moments that brought us to this day right here. First up, back in February, he releases a book called The Courage to Be Free, Florida's blueprint for America's revival. That, of course, happening on February 28th. And then in March, DeSantis then going on a cross-country book tour, stopping, of course, in Iowa, the site of the first presidential caucus. And then on March 20th, he sits down for a very important interview with Piers Morgan. And though he deflected questions about his potential Republican rival, Donald Trump, he had this to say about taking on Joe Biden.
You know, the guy I'm going to focus on is Biden because I think he's failed the country. I think the country wants a change. I think they want a fresh start and a new direction. And so we'll be very vocal about that. I spent a lot of time in Florida fighting back against.
You think you could beat Biden?
I think so.
All right, sounding like a candidate there. Then in April, DeSantis ramping up stops in those critical early primary states. Here he is speaking to top Republican donors in New Hampshire, a state favorable to former President Trump. He won that in 2016. And then on May 13th, he was back in Iowa, a state, I'll remind you, though, President Trump lost in 2016. This time flipping burgers and courting voters and looking every bit a presidential candidate. On Monday, moving vans spotted outside of Republican headquarters in Florida. This was a big clue right here as DeSantis and his staff moved into a bigger office, which brings us to today, a day that the news that he was about to announce and getting very close to announce, likely it's going to happen next week. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott also expected to make a major announcement early next week. Some think Senator Scott may emerge as Trump and DeSantis tear each other apart. It's all setting up for what is sure to be a tight race for the nomination. But does anyone have what it takes to take on former President Trump? NBC's Dasha Burns, who broke the news of DeSantis' likely announcement next week. She's been covering DeSantis' every move, and tonight she leads us off.
There you go. Tonight, NBC News first to report Florida Governor Ron DeSantis plans to formally announce he is running for president next week, according to two sources close to his political operation.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
His team is also summoning his top donors to meetings in Miami in conjunction with the announcement. A source familiar with the plans tells NBC News. The move comes after a long period of DeSantis testing the political waters.
We're proud of what we've done in Florida, but I have only begun to fight.
Just last week, making several high-profile campaign-style stops in Iowa, where he's been refining his attack on his soon-to-be top rival, former President Donald J. Trump.
We must reject the culture of losing that has infected our party in recent years. The time for excuses is over.
But the former president attacking DeSantis head on, trying to take out his biggest rival early with a familiar battle plan.
The problem with Ron DeSanctimonious is that he needs a personality transplant, and those are not yet available. Ron DeSantis, did anyone ever hear of DeSanctimonious? They keep saying, oh, I think DeSantis can do okay with farmers. I don't think so. Based on polls, he's not doing okay with anything.
The DeSantis strategy establishing himself as the anti-woke candidate.
What we've said in Florida is we are going to remain a refuge of sanity.
And leaning into legislation to boost his conservative bona fides. This week, signing bills banning gender-affirming care for trans minors and expanding the controversial parental rights and education law that critics call the Don't Say Gay bill. That bill leading to a high-profile battle with Disney. Just today, the entertainment giant announcing it's scrapping plans for a new $1 billion Florida campus amid its bitter dispute with DeSantis.
Part of the reason I think we've been able to do well in Florida is I don't look at polls to tell me what to do.
While he may say he doesn't look at the polls, Trump's lead over DeSantis has widened considerably. In February, he was within reach, but now that gap has expanded over 35 points, something he has been on the defensive about in the past.
I'm not a candidate, so we'll see if and when that changes.
A shadow campaign soon stepping into the 2024 spotlight.
Okay, Dasha Burns joins us now here live on Top Story. So, Dasha, what more details do we have on this planned announcement? I know we don't have much, but is there anything more you could tell us?
Yeah, not a ton of details to report, Tom, but we do have some more details on that donor summit that's going to happen on Thursday of next week. About 100 donors and supporters will be in Miami getting a briefing from DeSantis and his team and likely helping to do some fundraising, which, of course, is going to be critical for the soon-to-be candidate.
It would be interesting if he chose South Florida to make the announcement. Obviously, it's a major media market. It's a market that Republicans did very well in 2020 and 2016, but it's not his market. It's not his hometown, so we're going to have to wait and see. I do want to talk about next week, right, because you have Senator Scott likely to make his announcement on Monday. Unfortunately, on Wednesday, we have the anniversary of what happened in Uvalde, and then you're getting very close to Memorial Day weekend, where sometimes people tune out of the news.
Yeah.
So we don't really know if it's going to be Thursday, Friday, what's going to happen.
It's going to be a packed week, right? But the question has been going on for so long now. When is he going to announce? There's been a lot of pressure. Trump has been turning up the heat with those attacks on social media and on the campaign trail. And there's been a lot of debate from GOP strategists, operatives, consultants. You know, should he have gotten in earlier? Should he get in later? I think they laid the groundwork in Iowa with that visit that they felt was very successful, that Trump didn't ultimately even land. And now they've got rollouts of endorsements in New Hampshire. They're drip, drip, drip to this announcement. They feel like it's time.
And Dasha, you know, you just mentioned it there. We saw it in your report. The former president is hammering him hard.
Yeah.
Trump's super PAC is hammering him hard. How much do you think that in this announcement, Governor DeSantis is going to take on Trump? Or do you think it's going to be about his vision and his plan?
He's going to have to find his footing very quickly in terms of how he's going to handle the former president, right? When I talk to Republican voters, particularly in those critical early states like Iowa, when I ask them about the back and forth, the insults, right, even from Trump to DeSantis, even voters that have voted for the former president tell me they don't love the vitriol. They're put off by some of those personal attacks, and they don't want DeSantis to go down that road. But I do know that there are a lot of GOP operatives that are saying the opposite, that do think that he should go directly after Trump. Will that work? Is that the strategy he's going to take? We're going to have to see as he steps into the spotlight.
And some think if those two tear each other apart, there will be a lane for another candidate,
right,
possibly Senator Scott or someone else to emerge. Okay, Dasha, we thank you so much. Great break. We really do appreciate that. With two more candidates expected to enter the race next week, how will the candidates attract GOP voters without alienating the MAGA base? I want to bring in our panel, Time national political correspondent Molly Ball, and Kevin Madden. He's a communications strategist and served as senior advisor and spokesman for the Romney 2012 presidential campaign. I want to thank you both for joining Top Story. Molly, I'm going to start with you. You wrote this week's Time cover story on what Ron DeSantis means for America. What did you learn? And well, first, let's talk about this cover here, right? That's an interesting look at DeSantis there with a sort of a grin. I don't know if it's a grimace, what that is, and then peeling an orange there. What did you learn about Ron DeSantis in this cover story?
And I should make it clear that is not a photograph, it's a painting. So some creative license was taken, and I believe the orange is intended to be
obviously
symbolic in some way. Take what you will from it. But no, I think, what you learn from studying Ron DeSantis is really how relentless and focused and honestly effective he is. I think whether or not you agree with his policies, he is a governor who has been much more effective and has enacted a much more sweeping agenda. Look, Florida's had Republican governors for 25 years, but everyone you talk to in Tallahassee, all throughout the state, says that none of them have really transformed the state the way DeSantis has by operationalizing the culture war and really pushing against, the enemy of what he calls wokeness in various ways. And so, Trump has, as you mentioned before, has been attacking him primarily about his personality. But his allies will tell you that's really not the appeal of a governor or potentially a President DeSantis. The appeal is that he is relentlessly focused on policy and that he doesn't just talk about it, he really gets things done.
Dasha Burns wanted to stick around and kind of weigh in on this as well. We looked at that cover, right?
Yeah.
And it sort of paints this picture of DeSantis. And I got to be honest with you, that's probably the picture that President Trump wants voters to think of DeSantis as well. Is that who voters think DeSantis is? Because I got to tell you, right after the 2020 election, I heard three names a lot when I asked who would you vote for next time around, and it was Governor Ron DeSantis. Some people said still President Trump, and some people said Tucker Carlson. But a lot of people said Governor Ron DeSantis. What do voters think now that we know him a little bit better?
Look, there is a lot of enthusiasm for him when you go and you start talking to people on the ground. You're right, that name recognition, it's there. It is the only other name in the Republican Party besides former President Trump that's on voters' minds. What he now needs to do is coalesce everyone who's not the diehard Trumper around him, and that's going to be really tough when you do have Nikki Haley, when you do have Tim Scott, potentially Mike Pence, and others that might be jumping into the fray, and you have Donald Trump that he might have a ceiling, but he has a very high floor with that, 30% of the Republican base with him.
Kevin, you're a communications specialist. You've seen candidates who have made it through the primary process, candidates who have made it to the main stage. What does Governor DeSantis have going for him, and what does he need to work on?
Well, Dasha brings up a good point about the potential crowded nature of the field and, the need to really distinguish yourself in that crowded field. The one thing, and we saw it this weekend where Governor DeSantis was in Iowa, he has an ability to sort of get roadblock coverage wherever he goes that is quite extraordinary. And I think it sort of mirrors Donald Trump's ability to do that, or it gets close to Donald Trump's ability to do that, which really drives Donald Trump crazy. So I think that ability to sort of build up that name ID and have that level of awareness amongst the most diehard, most active Republican voters is a huge advantage for him. And I think he has to use it as he goes through his announcement and then through all those early contests on the early schedule for the Republican nomination.
Molly, but what's different about Governor DeSantis and Donald Trump, and I covered Trump in 2016, is that if Trump saw you had a camera, if he saw you had a tape recorder, he was stopping and he was answering all of your questions. Governor DeSantis has taken sort of a different strategy. At times, he likes to get into it with the national media, and sometimes he holds that grudge, if you will, whereas President Trump could sort of react to a reporter, and then 5 minutes later he would talk to him, or at least the next day. I mean, that was my experience. I know it was the experience of other campaign reporters. How hard was it for you to put this cover story together?
Well, I didn't get a lot of cooperation from Team DeSantis, and certainly did not have an opportunity to interview the governor, although I did speak to many people in his orbit. But this is something that you hear a lot as a potential obstacle for him, is that, as you mentioned, with Trump, a lot of it is kabuki, even as he's calling the press the enemy of the people and saying all kinds of terrible things about us. He still just craves that attention. Whereas with DeSantis, it was really during COVID when he started to feel beset by the mainstream media, feel like he wasn't getting a fair shake, and just sort of retreated into his bunker and has just all but ceased to engage with the so-called mainstream media. Now he engages quite a bit with the conservative media, with various conservative influencers, and I believe he was interviewed by Dinesh D'Souza just today. But the question is, as he comes out on the national stage, is he going to have to be more proactive? I mean, as Kevin mentioned, he doesn't have any problem getting covered, doesn't have any problem getting attention. Name ID is not going to be his problem, and that is traditionally the reason that you would engage with the media.
Dasha, I want to put up on the screen now something for our viewers. This is part of an op-ed that Karl Rove had in the Wall Street Journal. Out today. Of course, Karl Rove one time was the brain of the entire Republican Party. He writes, ironically, Mr. DeSantis was helped by the presumptive frontrunners' laser focus on the negative. Donald Trump has spent months running Mr. DeSantis down, saying he needs a personality transplant, arguing he's only an average governor, and repeating his nonsensical, childish moniker, Ron DeSanctimonious. Mr. Trump even depicted Florida as full of misery and despair because of Mr. DeSantis, while his campaign bragged about its extensive DeSantis Oppo research file. Are you finding that from voters as well? And it's sort of a hard argument because the former president moved to Florida, and that's where he's been living since he lost the 2020 election.
Look, if you talk to Republican primary voters, and that's who we're talking about right now, because these are the people that DeSantis and Trump are fighting over, right? When we get to the general election, some of the stuff that DeSantis is doing right now, totally different strategy, right? But right now, Republican primary voters, they are looking at Florida as a blueprint. That strategy is working from the people that I'm talking to right now. And look, the thing that I hear over and over again from voters who voted for Donald Trump twice, they are tired. They feel like, listen, they'll tell me he's being unfairly attacked. The media is against him. It's not fair. He was a great president, but it is a whole lot of baggage. And they are, some of them, of course, there are the diehards, but some of them are looking to somebody else like a DeSantis. Could he pave a path? Could he give us that permission structure to move away from Trump? Where, by the way, Tom, in some of these communities, like I went to the villages in Florida, it's very difficult to say out loud that you are not a Trump supporter. When it really, there is sort of this cultish phenomenon in some of these places.
Yeah, when you enter MAGA country. No, I agree with that. I experienced that when you're reporting. Kevin, I want to turn now to Senator Tim Scott, right, who's expected to jump into the race on Monday. His poll numbers may not be where his team wants him to be, but he's sort of a fresh face, if you will. He's someone that maybe not all of America knows, but he's going to campaign on a positive message, right? He's got an incredible life story, very well liked in the Senate, has some firm ideas, especially on immigration, on police reform. Where do you think he lands in this race? And can somebody with a positive message, almost a healer, survive a Republican primary?
Well, look, I mean, he has a very long road ahead of him. I mean, not only is the fact that he's not very well known, but he has a message that right now is somewhat incongruent with where the base activists are. The base activists inside this party, the folks who are going to show up in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Florida on the early part of the schedule, they want somebody who's going to take the fight to Joe Biden. They want somebody who's going to have this sort of clash of political civilizations and lead that clash against Democrats and sort of the progressives on the left. And they want a fighter. So an optimistic message works, a message that's very focused on the future of the country and where the direction of the party. Is there an audience out there for it? Yes. Is it as big an audience as the folks that right now are feeding the enthusiasm for Trump and DeSantis? I don't think so. And so that's going to be one of his main challenges. Is he going to be able to distinguish himself inside a contest that's going to have these two very big personalities in Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis? I think he's going to have the money. I think he's going to have the establishment support. And then he also has a sort of favorite son status in
the
South
calendar
Carolina.
favors him. The calendar favors him.
He has a favorite son status in South Carolina. But the other problem is that he's got Nikki Haley in there with that as well.
Dasha,
so
real quick. Dasha, you want to get in here real quick?
I just want to say, out there talking to voters, more than a few folks have said to me, hey, what about a DeSantis Scott ticket?
Right. Yeah, but Scott will tell you he's not running for vice president. Molly, I want to ask you about the debate. It's coming up in August. I don't think we have a set date yet. We know it's going to be on Fox News. There is a declared list of candidates, right? We know that candidates need to have at least 1%. That's correct. In polls, national polls, and they have to have, I think it's 40,000 unique donors. What else do we know about how this debate's going to shape up?
Very little. I mean, as you mentioned, we don't even know what day in August it's going to be held. And I don't believe that those thresholds have been officially announced. We've reported that they are under consideration. And this is always the dilemma, especially in a large field, is sort of how do you winnow it? How do you give candidates a chance to make their case while keeping out some of the fringier or less legitimate characters? Or, so what do you do with, say, Vivek Ramaswamy, right, who's registering in polls now but doesn't have a political resume? There will be various, I think, entrants like that where these thresholds have to be set. But these debates, I think, are the next big post on your timeline,
but
right?
Molly, if we put that graphic up, Molly, I want to put that graphic up again for our viewers. I mean, if that is the threshold, we could have a very crowded field on that debate stage, correct? Because the threshold is not that hard to make. I mean, you think 40,000 unique donors, that's actually not that hard to get. 1%, not that hard to get.
Well, 40,000 is a pretty big number. I mean, we'll see how many candidates are able to hit that threshold. And we have seen repeatedly in the past that they adjust those.
Molly, I'm told from the digital ad guys that 40,000 is doable for a lot of people, and people might be surprised. They may have to add another tier, but we're going to have to wait and see. Before we go, guys, because I've taken way too much time, I just want to get your take on this, Kevin and Molly. Chris Christie, there's some reporting from Semaphore that Scaramucci is going to back him. The billionaire Steve Cohen is going to back him, too, apparently, if he gets in. You think Chris Christie gets into this race?
I think he does. Look, but I would remind folks that Chris Christie was hovering around 20% in New Hampshire in the 2016 race, and then he decided to decamp and stay only in New Hampshire, and his numbers actually went down. The more people found out about him in a place like New Hampshire, the less they liked him. He said he has a tough road ahead as well.
Molly, you think he gets in?
It certainly looks like he wants to. He seems to be itching to do it, if for nothing else than just to take out Trump. He's been taking a very tough line against Trump. And some people are talking about him maybe even being a sort of kamikaze candidate who's only in there to damage Trump so that someone else can have a chance.
Okay, Molly Ball, Kevin Madden, Dasha Burns, great panel. We thank you for this robust discussion tonight here on Top Story. We do want to turn to some other breaking news. This happening overseas. The Vatican breached a car rushing through the Vatican's gates, speeding by Swiss guards into a palace courtyard. Vatican guards firing on the car's front tires. Keir Simmons joins us live tonight from London. Keir, thanks for staying up for us. Walk us through the breach and what more do we know?
Yeah, they're dramatic events, Tom. I think, though, for Catholics, practicing Catholics watching and those who really appreciate Pope Francis, hopefully there'll be some reassurances. But just to those dramatic events, as you laid out, this car went through the Santa Ana gate. It breached that gate. The Swiss guards tried to stop it. Then there was firing on the front tires of the car. That didn't stop it. It kept going to the courtyard of the Apostolic Palace. There, the driver got out. Now, the Vatican is describing him as in a difficult state. So it looks as if he was then arrested, but, you know, was not in a particularly healthy state at that stage. But the big question is going to be how he got through all of those guards. Now, I've been to that area of the Vatican, Tom. It is a relaxed place. There is a little area of shops. There's a small fire station. So you can imagine how this could happen. But of course, it's going to cause headlines around the world, and it's going to worry people.
Yeah, and then here, finally, do we know where the Pope was exactly?
So the Pope is at another part of the Vatican, right across, actually. It's probably about a 20-minute walk away from the Apostolic Palace. So around about that time, it was just after 8 o'clock. He would be having his dinner, people think. So probably he won't have been around. But that won't stop, I think, the questions about security being raised because inevitably, if the Pope was nearby, that would have been a whole different story.
Okay, Keir Simmons for us tonight. Keir, we appreciate you on that breaking news tonight. Back here at home, we do want to turn to some newly released body cam video out of New Mexico involved in that mass shooting. In the footage, officers are seen rushing towards the teenage shooter after he randomly killed 3 elderly women. We want to warn you, though, some of the images you may find are disturbing. Erin McLaughlin reports tonight.
Tonight in Farmington, New Mexico, new police body camera footage capturing the harrowing moment America's latest teenage mass shooter was shot dead by police.
Subject down!
In the footage released by police late Thursday, you see the officers running toward danger.
More shots are being fired!
Neighbors guiding them to the attacker.
I see him. Get behind the car, sir.
Another sergeant's camera records her being shot in a hail of gunfire.
I'm shot! Where's your tourniquet?
2 officers were among the 7 injured, all now released from the hospital.
We're securing!
This was the climax of 18-year-old Bo Wilson's deadly rampage through his own neighborhood. Police say 97-year-old Gwendolyn Schofield and her 73-year-old daughter Melody died trying to save 79-year-old Shirley Vojta, also killed. The day before his high school graduation, police say Wilson, armed with 3 different guns and having access to more than 1,400 rounds of ammunition, began firing an AR-15 assault rifle from his home. He fired more than 140 bullets before dropping the AR-15 and moving down the block, firing at random homes and cars.
He is yelling on the ring footage, come kill me.
Police say Wilson was initially wearing a bulletproof vest modified to include steel plates before taking it off for his last stand with police. The motive remains unclear. Their only clue, this chilling note found on his body saying, "I'm at the end of the chapter." Tonight, there are still so many unanswered questions following this stunning display of violence.
Aaron McLaughlin joins us tonight from Los Angeles. Aaron, that video is so tough to see. I understand we're hearing also from the shooter's family. What are they saying?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. The family releasing a statement sending condolences to all of the victims, adding that Wilson was battling mental illness, a battle that they say he lost. Tom.
All right, Aaron McLaughlin for us. Aaron, we appreciate it. We want to turn now to a massive fire at a construction site in North Carolina. Intense flames and huge clouds of smoke filling the air. The mayor urging residents to stay inside. Shaq Brewster is there for us on the ground in Charlotte.
It collapsed.
Tonight, 2 construction workers are missing after a massive 5-alarm fire in Charlotte, North Carolina.
It was huge. The pictures were terrifying.
The rapidly moving flames began around 9 a.m., taking over an apartment building under construction.
A very fast-moving fire, high heat conditions, well over 2,000 degrees. And as a construction site is open, a lot of wood is exposed.
The dense smoke could be seen for miles, the mayor warning residents to stay indoors.
It was very hot in the smoke, the water in my eyes. It was insane. I've never experienced anything like this.
More than 90 firefighters responded. Officials say rescuing 15 workers from the construction site, including one pulled from a crane and taken to the hospital. The blaze so intense at times, some firefighters needed help.
We had several Maydays.
Mill Creek Residential, the company who owns the apartment building, says no residents were living there and that our #1 priority is the health and safety of the people who are working there today and those in the surrounding area.
All right, Shaq Brewster joins us tonight from the scene there in Charlotte. Shaq, first up, what do we know about those 2 missing construction workers?
Well, Tom, no update this evening yet on the status of those 2 missing construction workers. There was some confusion earlier in the day when the fire department released a tweet saying that 2 workers had been accounted for, but they quickly revised that and said that those 2 workers have been unaccounted for. You saw those images, the smoke billow. You saw it from miles away. It's really a dire situation, so much so that the police department is now asking for members of the public to help. If they know of anyone who is at the scene and have not heard from anyone, they're asking you to contact Charlotte Police, Tom.
And then finally, I mean, from the scene there behind you, Shaq, it looks like this fire is under control. It's been put out. Give us an update on the state of the fire.
That's right, largely under control, but I'll tell you, you still see firefighters at the scene. They're currently still putting water onto what was left of that apartment complex. The chief, when we heard him speak earlier today, said that you can expect his team to be here for some time, and that's just talking about dealing with the fire. Then there's also the fact of the investigation. There's still no clues, no word on what actually caused this fire, but the chief said the investigation into the cause is just beginning. Tom?
Okay, Shaq Brewster for us. Shaq, we appreciate it. And we continue to follow that surge of migrants here in the U.S. after the expiration of Title 42. Tonight, we're learning an 8-year-old girl has died in Border Patrol custody after suffering a medical emergency. The second death of a child in a government-run facility in a week. This is cities thousands of miles from the border are struggling to house migrants sent to them. NBC's Miguel Almaguer has this one.
We want our gym back. We want our gym back.
Tonight, after days of protests, New York City officials moving some migrants out of shelters at public school gyms after fierce backlash from parents.
I think that they shouldn't be on school grounds, anywhere but not school grounds.
officials insisting they haven't changed their plans, that migrants are still sheltered at gyms as a last resort, with New York City at a breaking point. More than 67,000 migrants have arrived in the city since the crisis began, 4,300 in just the last week. By next year, officials say housing, food, and services for migrants will cost city taxpayers more than $4 billion. Tonight, the mayor of New York City says nearly half of hotels with an occupancy of up to 200 people are now housing migrants.
A little over 40% of them are handled by migrant and not outside visitors. It has overwhelmed our system.
New York, a so-called sanctuary city where local officials don't enforce federal immigration laws, has been a top draw for migrants, along with Philadelphia and Chicago. We are waiting to be told where they're going to place us, this man from Venezuela says. We want to look for jobs and secure education for the kids. Tonight, the hope of a better life, coming at a cost.
Meanwhile, we've learned an 8-year-old girl has died in Border Patrol custody in Texas, where she was being held with her family. So far, no other details have been released. Tom?
So very sad. Okay, Miguel, we thank you for that. Still ahead tonight, an urgent manhunt for an escaped inmate. Police say the man kicked out a window, then jumped out of the SUV during a transport, while authorities believe he then kidnapped 2 people. Plus, Cash App killing twist. The man accused of murdering a prominent tech CEO arraigned in California, how that man's sister may have been connected to the victim. And shoplifting epidemic, major retailers like Target losing hundreds of millions of dollars. You won't even believe the figure. Just this year, what experts say is driving the new spike. Top stories just getting started on this Thursday night. Okay, we're back now with the latest in the shocking death of San Francisco tech executive Bob Lee. The man accused of stabbing him appearing in court today as both sides started laying out their cases. Dana Griffin has the details.
The man accused of stabbing Cash App founder Bob Lee, leaving him to die on the streets of San Francisco, was in court today for his long-awaited arraignment. IT consultant Nima Momini, wearing a mask and an orange jumpsuit, pleading not guilty to murder. His attorney laying out a defense.
It's a combination of an accident and self-defense. Absolutely.
It was an accident with 3 stab wounds?
There was no premeditation, deliberation. Absolutely not.
District Attorney Brooke Jenkins defending the charges.
We believe that this was an intentional killing.
On April 4th, video obtained by the DailyMail.com shows Lee staggering for help moments after being stabbed. Police say he managed to call 911.
There's a male screaming help, saying someone stabbed me. Advised he's bleeding out.
Lee was rushed to a hospital but died on the operating table, according to the San Francisco Medical Examiner's report. The case gaining national attention because of speculation that the tech exec was randomly killed in a city with acute public safety concerns. But 9 days later, police announcing Momini's arrest.
Mr. Momini was taken into custody,
revealing the 2 men knew each other and were on camera riding in a car together just moments before the stabbing. A motion to deny bail saying that Lee had also known the suspect's sister, Kazar, for years, and that Momini confronted Lee about her. Prosecution documents revealing text messages from Kazar to Lee referencing an argument between the 2 men. She wrote, "Just wanted to make sure you're doing okay, because Nonima came way down hard on you," adding, "Thank you for being such a classy man handling it with class. Love you, selfish pricks." Kazar has been seen at her brother's previous court hearings with her husband, a prominent plastic surgeon by her side. The DA saying she declined to be interviewed by investigators, and the knife found near the crime scene with Momini's DNA on it matched cutlery inside his sister's apartment, according to prosecutors. The autopsy by the San Francisco Medical Examiner revealed Lee had cocaine, ketamine, and alcohol in his system. Defense attorney Paula Canny making these remarks 2 weeks ago.
I mean, Bob Lee's system is like the Walgreens of recreational drugs.
Today, apologizing for those comments.
I got angry. I lost my temper. And because I lost my temper, I said stupid things that hurt other people.
Khomeini's defense attorney is also criticizing police for taking 9 days to arrest him when she says they knew he did it, alleging that this created more stress on the family and the community. The DA responding that the officers needed those days to collect enough evidence. Khomeini is back in court tomorrow, so a judge can set a preliminary hearing date, which is supposed to happen before June 2nd. Tom?
Okay, Dana Griffin for us. Dana, we appreciate that. We want to turn now to the growing shoplifting epidemic across the country. Target telling investors it's anticipating more than $1 billion in inventory loss this year, driven by a nationwide spike in retail theft. Valerie Castro has more on this troubling trend.
Tonight, one of the nation's preeminent retailers asserting scenes like these are growing more common around the country. Target saying they lost an estimated $763 million in lost and stolen inventory last fiscal year, and that they expect crime-fueled inventory losses to jump by another $500 million this year. The company's CEO spelling out the struggle on an earnings call this week.
Theft and organized retail crime are increasingly urgent issues, impacting the team and our guests and other retailers. The unfortunate fact is, violent incidents are increasing at our stores and across the entire retail industry.
Headlines of major stores closing in San Francisco with employee safety considered. And now the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, announcing a comprehensive plan to tackle the 44% uptick in retail theft in his city last year.
When someone witnessed the systemic thefts that you're watching in our establishment, it hurts the entire economic stability of the city.
The city also reporting that 327 repeat offenders were responsible for more than 6,000 retail theft arrests in 2022, and other executives at big box stores like Walmart and Lowe's also calling out the emerging shoplifting threat.
Theft is an issue. It's higher than what it's historically been.
I've been doing this for 32 years, and I can honestly tell you we've not seen anything to this degree in the past.
And Target says the problem is only getting worse.
Target says it's on track to lose more than $1 billion in inventory this fiscal year, even as locations keep beauty products like shampoo and lotions under lock and key.
Even laundry detergent is locked up with metal cords at some retailers, and cameras abound trying to prevent shoplifters and employee theft alike. It's hard to measure exactly how much organized retail theft has grown because the data is reported directly by retailers and usually cannot be verified. But the National Retail Federation, a lobbying group representing retail interests, says it's an increasing issue.
These thefts are happening all over the country.
So how did we get here?
Yes, get them!
The organization attributes some of the problem to empty downtown areas since the pandemic, plus lax policing and prosecution. The group also saying organized retail crime groups are recruiting people in tough spots financially, with easier ways to sell these stolen products online.
There's no question the prevalence of marketplaces has made it easier to resell these products. Our members are working with law enforcement every day to help identify the main places that these things are being resold.
Data from the organization shows inventory loss growing, with March saying it's approaching $100 billion nationwide, and it's taking a toll on shoppers too.
And what do you think about the fact that this is happening all across the country? Stores are having to keep things under lock and key because shoplifting has become such a problem.
I personally think it's a huge issue, and policymakers, law enforcement need to figure out something, because it's a shame that citizens are, just trying to do their regular shopping and are impacted by other people's poor decisions.
All right, Valerie Castro joins us now in studio. Look, it is a shame, just like that woman that you interviewed just said there in the piece. Do we have any idea how long we're going to live like this?
So people are trying to find solutions. And here in New York City, the mayor is hoping to strengthen policing and penalties, especially for those repeat offenders, and provide mental health and addiction treatment resources for potential shoplifters in need. But the National Retail Federation emphasized the difference between someone stealing for personal use versus organized crime. And Tom, they're pushing for federal legislation, hoping to make stealing up to $5,000 worth of goods a federal crime.
Okay, Valerie Castro for us tonight. Valerie, we appreciate all that. When we come back, the cross-border fire danger, smoke from raging wildfires in Canada, now impacting several U.S. states, the air quality warnings now in effect, and rock band U2 now on an apology tour, why they're forced to refund hundreds of tickets to their upcoming Las Vegas residency. You won't believe where the tickets were sold and what the seats actually looked upon. Stay with us. Back now with Top Stories newsfeed and the urgent manhunt for an escaped inmate in Kentucky. Police say Norman Wolf was being transported to a court hearing when he managed to kick out a back window of this unmarked black SUV and jump out of the moving vehicle. According to authorities, he then kidnapped two people to drive him to another location. They were unharmed. He was already facing charges of burglary, fleeing police, in addition to a gun conviction. Okay, raging wildfires over in Canada are now impacting the northern U.S. Check out these satellite images. They show large amounts of smoke blowing across Canada right into multiple U.S. states. Video of smoky scenes across North Dakota. 23 million people under air quality warnings from northern Colorado to Wisconsin. The fires have burned nearly 2,000 square miles in Alberta. They also expected to impact oil prices, with some drillers forced to halt production. Irish rock band U2 forced to offer some refunds for their Las Vegas residency. Here's what happened. Show organizers say they realized during a production review, hundreds of tickets were sold with obstructed views because of an overhang in the venue. In addition to refunds, impacted fans are also being offered access to a pre-sale for a December show with seats that are guaranteed to have a full view of the band. The show is set to kick off September 29th. Okay, we want to turn now to new details on that Montana TikTok ban. We told you about this last night. Several users now filing a lawsuit to overturn it, even though some details of the ban remain unclear. Jake Ward has more.
Tonight, TikTok users fighting for their territory in Montana. 5 of them filing suit to block the statewide ban signed by Governor Greg Gianforte yesterday. Gianforte calling it the most decisive action of any state to protect Montanans' private data. The bill will take effect in January, and while it threatens to fine TikTok $10,000 a day for each violation of the ban and instructs app stores not to offer TikTok in Montana, enforcement details are otherwise vague.
I like being a voice for my state.
Christian Poole says he earns a modest side income as the unofficial Montana ambassador for more than 400,000 followers.
There being more cows than people here in Montana.
But he says driving out of state to use the app is not realistic.
I'm not entirely sure it'd be like super worth it taking like a possible 2-hour drive just to post.
Meanwhile, a TikTok spokesperson tells NBC News that Montanans can continue using TikTok as we continue working to defend the rights of our users. And in congressional testimony last month, its CEO insisted TikTok is not controlled by China.
The bottom line is this: American data stored on American soil by an American company, overseen by American personnel.
The ACLU, meanwhile, says there's no public evidence of harm that justifies a ban. But the ban does not mention specific national security threats and may be vulnerable, experts say, on First Amendment grounds.
And with that, Jake Ward joins us tonight from San Francisco. So, Jake, does this set the stage, increase the chances for a possible federal ban?
Well, it certainly puts pressure on federal regulators and the Congress to begin thinking about this. And it's important to note here, Tom, that that would be a nightmare for big tech companies. Social media companies have forever been trying to push white papers and gentle efforts to try to shape federal regulation because their nightmare is a balkanized policy landscape in which every state does it differently. Montana could be the beginning of that.
You know, Jake, we heard from the ACLU there in your report, and I understand Montana's already going to have some legal trouble with this statewide ban.
That's absolutely right. This new suit filed by 5 TikTok users accuses the ban of being a First Amendment violation. Certainly, we've seen federal efforts talking mostly about national security questions. Montana is home to a nuclear missile facility, but that is not mentioned in the governor's ban. It seems to be a First Amendment fight is what's on the horizon for that company.
All right, Jake Ward for us. Jake, we appreciate it. Now to Top Stories Global Watch and the explosion near the U.S. border with Mexico. New video showing the powerful blast in Tijuana, just a few miles from a port of entry into California. At least 24 people were hurt, including at least one person who was trapped in a basement. The cause of this explosion is still under investigation. Lawmakers in Chile have approved a mining tax reform that's expected to be signed by the country's president. The reform will require large copper and lithium producers that operate in a mineral-rich Latin American nation to pay more taxes and royalties to the government. Chile is the world's top copper producer and number 2 in lithium, which is essential in electric vehicle batteries. Officials say the new reform would bring in about $1.5 billion a year. And one of the world's oldest Hebrew Bibles has sold for a whopping $38 million at auction. The Codex Sassoon is said to be more than 1,000 years old. According to Sotheby's, it's believed to be the earliest surviving biblical manuscript containing all 24 books of the Hebrew Bible with punctuation, vowels, and accents. Okay, coming up, helping children in need. In the middle of the crisis on the border, a woman who fled her own country as a child, making it her mission to help now, turning school buses into safe havens to learn. That's all coming up next. Back now with the Americas. For so many families fighting for a better life on this side of the planet, and the children who end up in the center of an immigration crisis, we have an uplifting story for you tonight. A woman from Colombia who fled to the U.S. decades ago as a refugee saw the unfolding crisis in our region and decided to act. She's providing kids with something they've sorely lacked: comfort, care, and an education. NBC's Sam Brock with her story.
At a celebration of social changemakers in Miami, Estefania Rebellon takes it all in and has quite the story to tell.
I come from a family that unfortunately had to migrate. It was a forced migration. I was 10 years old at the time, and my dad unfortunately was targeted by the FARC in Colombia.
Threats of kidnapping prompting Estefania and her family to seek refuge from her home in Colombia to Miami in 2002, ultimately landing on her feet and gifted with a new perspective.
I always invite everyone to ask themselves, what would it take for you to leave your home? Literally, just today, put 2 outfits in a bag and go. That's what's happening to all these families, and it's extremely disruptive.
Devastatingly so for children left without a safe zone or even basic schooling. But in 2018, as news reports highlighted caravans and treacherous journeys,
Yay!
Estefania says a eureka moment. She pushed pause on her acting career to turn school buses into classrooms.
¿Esto qué es?
And shelters into safe spaces for learning, aided by the modern wonders of the internet.
How much does a school bus cost on eBay?
So our first bus was about $10,000, and then we ended up spending about $25,000 converting it. We learned everything on YouTube.
Rebellon and her Yes We Can World Foundation now have several buses in Tijuana and a full facility in Juarez, helping about 300 students at a time. In the 4 years the program has been running, she's enrolled around 2,500 kids.
Is this your life mission now?
Oh my gosh, that's a question I ask myself all the time. I think it's definitely sort of like purpose found me to eventually open a school. And it's just something that I always aspired to. It's just been something that it's been a 180 turn in my life, but it's definitely a life mission.
And the mission is blossoming. Kids between the ages of 3 and 15 can access emotional support and English as a second language. The help has flowed from many corners. Duolingo's founder donating iPads. Pop sensation Camila Cabello visiting Tijuana 2 years ago, posting about her experience. And the Elevate Prize Foundation hosting its first Make Good Famous Summit in Miami, honored Estefania with a grant for $10,000.
Estefania is the one who's closest to the issue, right? She has the proximity to the people, to the organizations, to the community. This is called trust-based philanthropy, and it's at the center of our values as a foundation.
With Title 42 only deepening the need, Estefania knows these children face an uphill battle.
It is something you carry with you. You're an immigrant forever, and it completely changes your life.
But in this case, with a few converted buses and a whole lot of care, Estefania's changing their lives too, driving a new direction of hope. Sam Brock, NBC News, Miami.
We thank Sam for bringing Estefania's story to us. When we come back, together at last, a woman searching for her biological family for decades, then finding a brother who didn't know she existed thanks to a DNA test. The moment the two met at the airport, we were right there. We'll bring it to you. Stay with us. Finally tonight, DNA Discovery, an online genealogy website revealing a sister a San Diego man never knew he had. They finally connected and chatted for a long time online, but we were there when they finally met face to face. Here's Stephen Romo.
At San Diego's airport, David Aguirre awaits a special type of arrival.
My heart's racing right now. Last night it felt like Christmas. It's like Santa Claus is coming.
He's about to meet his older sister Janice for the first time. A sister he didn't even know he had for more than 50 years.
You know, what a blessing for her to reach out and try to find her real, blood family. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
Janice, who was adopted before David was born, spent 30 years looking for her birth family. Then finally, she found a match on the DNA testing service 23andMe.
I seen a picture of her, and I could actually see my father in her face, everything about her. She was definitely related.
After meeting in the height of the pandemic, the two have been in touch over text and email, but no phone calls.
We communicated, shared stories, but never really picked up the phone, and I wanted to wait for this moment to actually hear her voice.
Now the wait,
she's right here coming down. She's right there.
Is finally over.
Look just like Dad.
See you. Look just like me.
As for what's next,
go have a glass of wine.
Yes, yes.
A shared family meal, decades in the making, and the chance to make up for lost time.
We're cherishing this.
Yes.
We're very lucky. We've lost quite a few siblings.
We
and
have
a lot
lost
of people,
siblings, yes.
But we have each other.
And a big thank you to NBC San Diego, who helped us out with that story. And we thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.